G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David, and I also run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we specialise in helping property investors scale up their investment property portfolios. On that journey as being a property investor, there'll be some highs, there may be some lows, but one thing we want to do is get in front of as many experienced investors, buyers, agents, financial planners, accountants, people that I often refer to as best in breed. They bring years of experience, but most importantly, they bring the wealth of knowledge to go, here's what to do, but here's what not to do as well. Our guest today is all that and more. I'm talking about Nathan Prasad from Invision Property. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hey Aaron, thanks for having me on.
No, mate, welcome. I'm really excited because we have a number of our investor clients, eyeing off the Queensland market. And one thing I want to do is kind of get inside your head, get that knowledge out of there, and so we can share it, very selfishly with our own clients. But also, I think you've got a great amount of experience. You've been there, done that. You've, no doubt, you've made some mistakes. You've made some upside and some rewards as well. So, what I want to do is go on that journey with you as well and learn out, those mistakes or those learnings that you've had, what not to do, but most importantly, what you can also bring to the table for a lot of our investor clients as well. So, mate, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much. Hopefully I can unpack some of those questions you've got about the market over here and share some of the stories that I've been through myself.
Absolutely, mate. But before we kick off, look, I ask all our guests that come on the 3 Ps. So a bit about yourself personally, a bit about yourself professionally, and a bit about your property journey as well. So if you want to share and indulge us, mate, that'd be great.
I guess just like at a personal basis, I'm in South East Queensland, so I'm always into my fitness.
Lovely.
Going to the gym in the morning, on the weekends, love going to the beach, going down the coast or the Sunshine Coast. We're pretty spoiled here.
Absolutely. It's very spoiled.
So if I'm not looking at properties or, if I get a weekend off, I'm always either down at the beach or going for a hike.
Yeah.
Professional wise, I guess, I spend full time working as a buyer's agent. We were buying roughly, 4 to 6 investment properties a month. Sometimes we're helping out some families. So, always on the hunt for properties and keeping up to date with the local market and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I guess, just to really sum it up, I'm either in the property space or either out in the out on the weekend in nature, trying to recharge.
It's a great balance, right? The kind of what you do, I won't say 9 to 5, but what you do during the week is very research, very logical, very, very data driven. And then you got that ability just to switch off a little bit. And then,
man, it's totally. So there is that whole data aspect of it, like looking at the numbers and stuff, but you're dealing with real people helping them buy investment properties or their family home. It can be a massive emotional roller coaster.
I'm glad you said
it. And then you're negotiating with agents, man. By the end of the week, I'm drained. I'm dealing with agents, dealing with clients, keeping everything together. So as a buyer's agent, you're sort of always keeping it together. And, I'm always exhausted by the end of the week. So
mate, I love it.
I'm just drawn to recharging.
It's real talk because, rationally, every Australian should be buying or investing in property. Like it's well performed as an asset class, for example. But emotionally, there's a lot of challenges that come with it. People may have done well, people may have not done well, legacy stories, parents that haven't done well. So you've got to look at all these different layers when you're dealing with different clients, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's buying an investment property, but there's also a personal aspect to it. I've got clients that, they really like certain parts of Brisbane or they want a certain style of house. So it's a matter of catering to that as well. I might have the best area that I want to invest in, but does that suit them from a personal approach? So It's just about, working with them to get a result. I enjoy it. I love it. Like today I went to a pre-settlement inspection. I'm on the phone to the clients in Sydney, showing them the property they just brought. They're just over the moon. And I got to sit down with the sellers and learn about their next stage of jumping in a caravan and traveling around. So it's awesome to be a part of that.
Mate, excellent journey. Mate, what I want to kind of pick your brain on is Brisbane's become, certainly not going to use the word hotspot, but it's become a real investor focus, right? There's some, great great blocks, great size properties, for example. There's a lot of infrastructure development. The Olympics has been a big driver as well, puts it on the map. But that corridor, that South East Queensland corridor, has become quite a really, become highly sought after for a lot of investors, right? Good yields as well. So take me through, right? What I say about buyers agents is that they're boots on the ground, right?
Yeah.
So they can see what's happening at a local level. They can connect with the real estate agents, go, here's the type of buyers that we're getting, here's the type of vendors and the type of properties that are coming on. So you get a really interesting perspective. Take me through from what you're seeing in this corridor at the moment, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do get a lot of people inquiring through the website and everything like that, and they're sort of shopping either between here or Adelaide or Cairns, and I can only really speak for South East Queensland. But as an area, they're spending over $15 billion on infrastructure. We've seen a lot of like apartment towers getting put up, a lot of public transport being upgraded, a lot of money being spent on the actual local economy. And then one of the biggest aspects, I reckon, as well, is that we've got a lot of interstate migration. On average, we were seeing roughly between 20 to 30,000 per year, but now that's jumped up to, 30 to 40,000 in the space of 3 to 4 months. And that alongside, we're going to start to see international migration is really, I think, going to drive prices up here. I'm just lucky to be a boots on the ground agent here. So I'm able to help clients that are looking to buy, particularly in the South East Queensland market. But there are sort of so many strategies you can look at with the South East Queensland market where, one that I was talking to a client yesterday that we got was over in Wellington Point, but it was on a block of land that could be subdivided. Right. We picked it up for $560,000 and it's going to rent for $500 per week. Getting a good yield, you're getting a property that can be developed and you're getting it within, say, about 20 Ks from the CBD. So I guess the massive factor of it being affordable and being able to achieve those really good yields are still available at the moment. So investors are loving it.
Love it. You just touched on a really important point that I want to bring up, which was opportunities for subdivisions or development, right? We've had a couple of clients and I've seen it, we've heard some horror stories where they've bought a property and they thought it was an opportunity and they've gone, say, to council and it's like, nah, it gets knocked back. Maybe it was the Queenslander style home, maybe it was the actual block, for example, maybe it was the council rules. I'm going to preempt by saying because you work specifically in this corridor, the council regulations, what can be developed, what cannot be. That years of knowledge, can you kind of share with us some really key points or some insights that you've picked up along the way when you know what's, and your trained eye now sees it, what is development options versus not?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people always entering that space of, hey, I want to become a developer. I was lucky because, my entry point was through the building space and then I started helping a lot of developers and, developers are really smart with negotiating, working out how to say no. So from like the start, you've got to work out, where the services are located, something about Brisbane, a lot of people don't realise if the block actually slopes back, you've got to put in this whole stormwater management program. It can cost thousands of dollars. So, I'd say look at where your services are located. Jump on Brisbane City Council, whatever the local council is, check the overlays. So in Brisbane in particular, you've got your character overlays and then you've got medium density, etc. But you want to make sure that it doesn't have a character overlay and then you want to go through and make sure there's a bunch of other things within that space, but just making sure it's not character overlay. Make sure it doesn't have any flooding. And if you can get somebody to come check out the block, check the slope on the block. Those are probably 4 of the key things, services, locations, make sure it's actually the correct overlay, check the block, and then also just do your research on comparables and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I could probably go on forever. There's so many parts to buying a development site that you really want to make sure that you're not overpaying on it. Because as you probably know, build costs are going up pretty rapidly at the moment. And if you lock in a build price for 700, you could almost say that it'll go to 750, 800 by the end of the year.
Correct. It's one of those, I won't say uncontrollables, but it's one of those things you got to factor in pretty early on. We know it's going to happen. It's a bit like rising rates. Rates are going to go up. you got to factor that in as part of your cash flow, as part of your, then if you go to sell it, for example, part of those costs of doing business, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's so many beauties about actually getting these sites. I just picked up one myself that I'm going to hold. But this is probably a cool thing that a lot of people that are looking in Brisbane, if the property is within 300 walking meters, so you can measure it on Google using
Google Maps
or RP data. If it's within 300 meters, you can actually split a 600 square meter block up into 300 square meter blocks. And now these 300 square meter blocks are getting looked at like 400 square meter blocks because the market's moving at a rapid pace.
Right.
In a suburb like Camp Hill, they're selling for over $2 million for a house and land package off a 300 square meter block. So there's a lot of money to be made in that space. If you brought a block close to the city centre for around 1.5, there could be between 400 to 600K worth of profit in a small deal like that.
Yeah, fantastic. So would you, from your past projects, and just want to share, only what you're willing to share with us, mate, do you want to take us through your journey as an investor and kind of what's been under the hood of your portfolio, what you've learned as well, mate?
When I went to go buy my first investment property, I made the mistake of, I was living in a suburb, it's in Logan, called Boronia Heights. So then I'm like, hey, I want to be an investor. So I managed to get a loan for around 350K. Started going to open homes. At the second open home, this agent was like, hey, I've got this really good property. Took me to this home that had a pool and a granny flat. It was around 400K. And it was like, it sold me emotionally. Yeah. I ended up buying it. Turns out the median house price in that suburb was 300K. Property I purchased was 400K. 2 years later, I was like, hey, I want to try refinance this. The banks are like, we've got no comparables. You got the most expensive property in the area. So done a small renovation, and I pulled out, an extra 20K on the deposit. That enabled me to buy something. I then changed my focus to cash flow to capital growth. I was like, hey, how close can I get to the CBD? I'm a bit younger. I can just hold it. It's going to cost me a bit more money over time, but I'll get the capital growth. I then bought a property over in Holland Park. It was about 10 Ks out. It was a real crappy house. Old pre-war home, 2 bedrooms with an old kitchen, everything like that. I just bought it and then rented it out for, I was sort of negative gearing, but I bought it for 560. Sort of fast forward 4 years later, I was able to sell it for 960.
Wow.
So then, that was good because then I was able to grab that money and then sort of buy another sort of positive cash flow style property in a suburb called Wenham West. About 4 months ago for 600, and then I just brought another sort of capital growth property in Holland Park, and then I just bought another one in Camp Hill. So I was able to use that money I made from that first initial deposit of around 20 grand that I saved when I was 21.
Yeah,
I was able to turn that into 3 properties. You know what I mean? So there's probably a lot to unpack there, but I'm hoping that just sharing that kind of helps somebody to think, hey, instead of going cash flow first, maybe we should target capital growth, depending on what stage you are in your portfolio and your age.
That's just super important. One of the things we talk about with our investor clients is cash flow is great, but if it's not worth more in a few years' time, you've got to talk net present value of cash, but also time in the market and where else you could have invested to get a different return, right? So, yeah, I think the word you used there, emotionally, you got emotionally hooked or attached to a certain type of property. Ration went out the window, but it's also 2 things as a first or younger, and this time first-time investor. It's you have a limited budget, right? So, yeah, 21, you're not earning what you're earning now, right? So generally, you're going to be earning the least that you will at that young age, and you've got a very limited deposit. So it doesn't give you very many options. And we see this time and time again with our younger investors is they've got the ambition, they've got the drive, but they've got very limited resources, borrowing capacity and deposit. And ultimately it's like that yearning to get into the market means you compromise. And my first purchase was terrible. It was terrible. I'm embarrassed by it, but it got me into the market. I learned from it. A unit in North Parramatta, and then I renovated and overcapitalized on it, tried to sell it, and mate, it was all what you experienced, right? But now you learn quite more, sometimes learn more from the mistakes that you make versus, when things are smooth sailing and just like this inflated sense of confidence that comes with that when everything's going great for yourself as well, right?
Oh man, absolutely. It does hurt when you're like, oh, damn it, I worked so hard to get that deposit, and then I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I think what I would have done a bit differently, I was limited with my budget, but I could have been a bit more savvier and brought maybe a bit more closer to the CBD with the 400K at that time.
Yeah.
And maybe brought a property that I could have added value to. But there was a couple of things there. That agent really knew I was a first-time buyer.
Yeah.
I put 380 as the offer. He just crossed it out in front of me and put 400, and he said, "This is what I can only offer." I didn't even know at the time that I could actually negotiate. So I didn't know how. You're
coming up against a skilled negotiator. Yeah, right. So this is again.
Yeah, but now, a buyer's agent, 80% of what we do is negotiating. Like, if I got a deal, gave it to any buyer right now, they wouldn't know how to close it effectively, that they get the best outcome. And that's a whole conversation by itself. But
so going back to you just mentioned about being a buyer's agent, and in a really strong market, a lot of our clients go, well, look, hang on, why would I pay a buyer's agent when what's the point? Off markets, they'll probably take it to market anyway. So what real value is the buyer's agent going to give me? I'm like, look, you're not just paying for the straight transaction, you're paying for the research, the knowledge, the trained eye, for example, and the amount of buyer's agents we have that I get the privilege of sitting in front of. I'm like, this is what you're paying for. They looked at thousands and thousands of properties, and you and I are looking at maybe 100 or so when we go to look to buy. So it's not even comparable. So take me through. There's probably two questions in there. One is, off markets versus on markets. So do you see a difference, and do you have access to that? And the next one is, how are you then, and you mentioned about negotiations, what is that secret sauce, if you want to kind of share with us as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like the first part around finding off markets. So that's just the process through, emailing the agents weekly. I'm texting them, I'm calling them. Yeah. Just through that, I've got, 8 hours a day to contact agents compared to your average buyer. Yeah. Through that, I find the majority of them are pre-markets. So they're just about to hit real estate and domain. Yeah. And then that moves us into the next part. So, I convince the agent, hey, just let us come through, have a look at it. They're like, no, they actually want to go online. But I kind of just gauge off the conversation and try to convince them, just, hey, let's go through. Then they let us come through the property. And then that's when I'm like, we've got an offer. Things I use as sort of takeaways, like, hey, we need to know by tonight, can you present it to the seller? Long story short, like the market's moving so quickly, they haven't seen it. So we offer them 500K. They think they've got an awesome deal because they're only going to get like 450, 480. Yeah. And that's where we sort of pick it up. And then we pick it up sort of 5-10% below market value. And with the market moving at the rate it's going at the moment, other 10%, here you're at 20%. Somebody puts a 20% deposit down, they've made 50% on their cash. That's the formula. So it's about trying to get it before it hits online. Yeah. Then getting in there and then convincing the agent, understanding the situation, and then letting the agent know, hey, we're going to buy it. Also, always keeping them on the hook, trying to remove any other buyers. So just, hey, Mr. Agent, can you just keep this between me and you just for now? I just want to have a quick look at it. I've got a qualified buyer. They're all pre-approved. They've got a massive deposit. We want to get this transaction through. No issues. Yeah, just sort of selling the buyer. Yeah, the whole time from the start of the conversation, and then just pre-framing it and building that solid rapport. And then when you go in, you just got to say, hey, I need you to present the contract. And then when a seller sees the contract, it's like, hey, we're actually looking at this other property around the corner that's off market. We need to know by tonight. Yeah. Right. And then you're just putting pressure on the seller. So it's the same strategies a sales agent uses on a buyer. You're sort of just trying to flip it and use it on the seller. Beautiful. And around on the market sort of negotiations. So there was a property out in Wynnum. It was for a family purchase. They really love this house. What we done was we done some real in-depth like research on the local market. We know the market's moving at this sort of pace. So we want to work out how much will this property be worth in, 3-4 weeks time when it settles. And we are able to come to a price between 1.3 to 1.4. And the client was happy to go at a 1.3, and I added in $1,000. So we won it by exactly $1,000. But because we done that research up front, they were able to confidently go in there and put an offer.
So when you're talking to the agent, it's time pressures, and you are dealing with qualified buyers. So that's one thing when you're delivering a buyer to the real estate, it's like they're pre-approved, they're ready to go, this is a done deal. Like this isn't going to fall through, for example, as well. So at what stage are you doing, say, due diligence, say you're building in pests and you're conveyancing, like how quickly is that all moving through when you've got buyers that are
it can be super quick. We got one in a suburb called Ferny Grove last week. So Wednesday I found out about it in the morning.
Ferny Grove as well as a pocket, right? So
yeah, Ferny Grove's it's only about 14 k's out.
Yeah.
This off market came up, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, like low set brick home on over 800 square meters.
Yeah.
The agent called me up. I said, I've been talking to him for 2 years. He's never let me go through the pre-market, but he's like, okay, today I'll let you go through. And then he said, I'll give you 1 hour to put an offer in. I looked at it at 2:00. By 6:00 that night, we had an offer in. I had all the due diligence done, and then I raced it, inspected it, and then the client put in, I have to say to the clients, I need you to trust me when it gets to times like that. So we put in trust with me, and then we put an offer in, and we got it under contract by $850.
Yeah.
But the due diligence you have to be quick. Like in the space of a few hours, I had the due diligence over to the client, and I was already over there inspecting it, because on Friday they actually went live, but they went live with it under offer. So we brought it, and it's awesome property. It's going to rent for $650 per week, $850K purchase price, massive block, and it's only like 12 to 14 Ks from the CBD. It's so I think it's really affordable and still really cheap at the moment.
Perfect. So when you're looking at a block like that, again, trained eye, 800 square meters, what is the option for someone for the future? Are there any opportunities for something like that?
In that part of the Moreton Bay, that block wasn't actually subdividable.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it was just on a large piece of land. So over time.
But this is it, right? Because a lot of people will see the 800 and go, they can get excited by that. So this is where understanding, again, having the value of someone like you in their corner going, I see the land size and go, oh, that's a development opportunity. And you're going, well, actually, I know the area, I know the council, going, you can't actually do much right here, right now with this as well, right?
Yeah. And it's little things too. It's like the frontage, because I knew the frontage wasn't 20 meters. I knew it couldn't be done. But your average buyer would just see the block size and be like, tick.
Yeah, great. Perfect, mate. I guess you've lived and breathed the journey as an investor. You're dealing with investors day in, day out. If you were to kind of share any thoughts or wisdom that you've got for people that are on the journey and looking to start out, scale up their property portfolio, what would be some wise advice you could pass on, mate? One
of the biggest things I see a lot of investors do is they sort of trust Google and everything like that and all the data points online.
Yeah.
What I would highly, highly, highly recommend is just jumping on the phone, calling agents, looking in a suburb that you want to buy in and look at the under offer properties, call them up and say, hey, how many groups did you have through? How many offers did you receive? And then what style of buyers did you have? That's going to give you a good indication of that suburb and that buyer profile within that suburb. Just taking the time to do that, because at the end of the day, you're going to be spending $500, $1 million on this asset. Don't be silly like me and buy a property for above the medium house price. And then try to always be on your back foot when you're talking to a sales agent. In Brisbane, they love to just put for sale. Make sure you do your research around, if that price they're asking for their price guide is justifiable. Doesn't mean that they're saying offers over 700, it's worth that. I'm only mentioning that because I've seen a lot of people actually pay the 700 and not doing their research.
Right.
And then also just always remember that the sales agent is always working for the seller.
Yeah. Their job is to get the best price they can for their client, which is the seller, right? And so when you're going to sell, that's the type of agent that you want. But when you're trying to buy, they're competing priorities. You want the lowest price, they want the highest price. And again, it comes down to who's the stronger negotiator, and they do this day in, day out. So you just have to know who you're up against when you're competing. But the goal is we want the property. So you got the common goal. You sort of try and find the way to achieve that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing would be try to call them on their lies. on the BS. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a good radar.
You know, if they say they've got a buyer, you know, just don't fall for it straight away. Try to ask more questions.
Thanks very much. Mate, I really appreciate it. Nathan, we're going to pop your details. So if anyone wants to reach out to you specifically, and that's what I love about niching. So people like niche, and you're talking about the South East corridor of Queensland, Brisbane, for example. So if people want to reach out to you, we've got the details there. Nathan Prasad, I want to say thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your insights, man. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to having a chat with you in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron, for having me on the show.
Yeah, mate, absolutely.
Look forward to chatting to you again.
Wonderful. If you found that helpful, please feel free to reach out to Nathan or to myself. And if you've got any other questions, particularly about that part of Australia, we'd love to hear from you as well. And until next time, that's a wrap for the Australian Property Investment Podcast. We'll see you next time.